Hey guys, it's Laura from Team Callahan at Keller Williams. Welcome to our another episode of Coffee Talk. This time we're coming to you virtually. We've got a little Zoom recording here. And my first returning guest is Billy Norse from Weissman Law. And today we are talking all about estates, wills, all that kind of fun, light stuff, right? So welcome back, Billy.
Yeah, all the stuff people love to talk about. Yeah, it's good to be back. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. So as we kind of mentioned, if in case people didn't hit the first episode that you were on, which was, I want to say about a month or two ago,
Those are happier times.
right? Back in the day, you work with Weissman Law. You are an attorney, a lawyer, whatever term we want to say. And I said that you do real estate law, and you corrected me. What's the way that we talk about your law? What practice do you do?
Happy law. I do happy
law. Yeah, happy law. So, yeah, we frequently use Billy for our real estate closings, our buyers and sellers. But also, you do a lot of work with people for estate planning and all that kind of stuff. So you're kind of an expert in this, or I'm going to call you an expert.
No, I wouldn't. I don't know if I'd call myself an expert, but I am well versed.
Okay. Perfect. So, Billy, generally speaking, I mean, if we're going to talk about wills, who should have one?
I mean, the technical answer is everyone should have a will. But, some people don't own anything. And, and the question is, well, if you don't own anything, and I hear this from people, they say, well, there's nothing, I don't really have anything. Why do I need a will? I mean, they're probably right. But consider this, because I've seen it. What if this situation we had someone pass away in the family who left property to other family members, but that estate took a long time to process. And then this other person died who was to receive some of that property, and they had no will. So, sometimes you may not think you have something, but you may actually have it. You don't even know it.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And then another question that comes up, or an explanation for not having a will is well, I'm married, and I want my spouse to get everything, and that's true. In the state of Georgia, if you pass away and you don't have a will, and you're married, your spouse will be entitled to your property through what's called intestate succession. Now, you may not want your spouse to get everything. Now, if you've got kids, your kids also share a portion of that too. I mean, there's rules on that. So sometimes people will say, well, I don't need a will because I want my spouse to get everything anyway, or I want it to go this way. But let me tell you where things get weird. If you have children and you're married and you do not have a will and something happens to you and you die, your estate will be divided. And your estate being anything that you own at the time you die that's in your name. Will be divided between your spouse and your kids. And sometimes that's not what the family wants.
Right.
Especially if your kids are young, maybe even more especially if they're 18 or 19, and, they may not be the most responsible people out there. So, that could be a problem because, if you pass away and you leave say, for instance, your wife, a widow now with kids, and then all of a sudden she learns that the assets you have, which could be a house, bank accounts, any of that stuff, that's going to be divided between her and the kids. And that could put a big strain on her. So, it's, I always recommend to people, always, if you're married and have children, you need a will. It's really a disservice to your spouse not to get one. Even if your intention is that you want it to be divided up with the children, at least you can put some groundwork.
Right. So essentially, I mean, having a will is a very adult thing to do. I remember the day that I think it was in the same month I got a will and life insurance. It felt like, whoo, next level.
Yes.
I think the older you get, and I think I was in my 20s when I first got a will because I owned a house. It was something that was tangible that I wanted to make sure that it was spelled out. So generally speaking, a will is going to cover obviously any kind of property possessions, that kind of deal. Assets, so to speak, but it also, in your example with the family, I mean, it covers everything. regarding guardianship. I mean, anything and everything, healthcare directives, there's all these little subsects of your will that you can put in there and really specify out what your wishes are.
That's true. And that's a good word that you used. A will and other estate documents is very adulting. It's a sign of being an adult. And frankly, a lot of folks, even adults, it's very uncomfortable for them to talk about it and to do it. It's probably, I'd say, the most put off thing that I hear. I intended to get one and we put it off. And, it's interesting because, you see folks who pass away without a will who are very wealthy. Sure. And then you see people who have nothing. And I mean, I think it affects everyone. But, to your point, there is several things that could happen when you pass away that you need to think about and be aware of. And another thing that could happen besides the will is beneficiaries on your accounts. So say, for instance, you have a checking account, which most people do. You may also have a investment account, mutual fund, something like that. You could actually designate on those accounts who you want to get those when you pass away. And so if you know who those people are, it's a good idea to go ahead and designate them because it's going to make their lives easier. It's going to pass them automatically when something happens to you.
Yeah, I think from my experience personally, and then also just what I've heard, the clearer you can be in those directives, the easier it just makes it for everyone else. And so speaking about a will and kind of getting started, if I don't have one, generally speaking, some of the things that we just talked about, like money, assets, children, all of that kind of stuff, are things that you want to go ahead and start thinking about. Is a good first step just to reach out to someone like you? And is there like a questionnaire or something that I can look at to kind of get me thinking about those decisions that I need to make?
Oh yeah. It's a great first step just to start asking some questions. And we have questionnaires and all that. And because I think it's a back and forth process.
Sure.
You have an idea of what you think you want, and then, usually I trip people up because I say, well, what if that person has predeceased or that person has passed away? Oh, I don't know. That's what people say. Something I think you alluded to earlier that I wanted to talk on is a will is also a great place to say, who do you want to be the guardians of your children?
Right.
So, what happens if you and your spouse are both killed in a car accident? Unfortunately, I think the third leading cause of death is unintentional accidents, which is car accidents, basically. So if something happens to both you and your spouse, you could appoint or give a preference for the guardian of your children in the will. And that's a very, soothing thing to know, that who's going to actually be taking care of your kids.
Sure. And so speaking of will and thinking about these different things and different life events like children or whatnot, I mean, how often should someone update their will? Is it something that I do it once and I'm set for life? Do I need to update it when there's a change of assets? Maybe I buy or sell a property, or change in people in my life, like have a child? Like, how often should someone update their will?
That's a great question. So when I draft a will, I try to draft it that in a way that will carry forward through many different possible events for many years in the future. But I would say that if anyone in your will passes away, that's a good time to update it. So if you're leaving property to somebody and they have predeceased, they have passed, maybe this is your executive, it's probably a good idea to go do what's called a codicil, which is like an amendment to a will, or just redo the whole will. And that will just, make it more clear. It'll resolve some confusion. If you get married, you have a life event, even get divorced, I would recommend something like that, to update your will. Now, it may not actually affect your will depending on how it's drafted and, the laws of your state. But it's always a good idea, any major life event or the passing of somebody, to do an update then.
What about,
or if you acquire a lot of property?
Okay, that was my next question, is from a real estate perspective, which we are, if I'm buying or selling, like I buy a house, I sell my house, is it necessary to update it every time, or kind of like, hey, there's been some acquisitions or some turnover, it'd be a good time to check it?
Well, it depends on how the will's drafted.
Okay.
All right. Now, I always recommend to people when they buy a house, hey, it's a good time to get a will. But say, for instance, if your will says that I leave my property located at, 34th Street to my son, all right, and then you sell that property, and now you acquire property on 60th Street, then the way that was drafted, it's possible that, it may have unintended consequences. So, it could be drafted in a way you could say that, any residence that I'm residing in or any home that I own, but, any kind of large purchase is a good time just to not necessarily update your will, but just to review your will and make sure that it's still solid.
Gotcha. It was kind of like what they say, whenever the time changes, check your smoke detector batteries, so kind of attaching it to life events. It's like, hey, whether we change it or not, let's just touch base on it and make sure that it's still working for what we need it to do.
Right. Get out of the drawer, blow off the dust, and then check it out again.
Nice. And so since it's such a light subject that we're hitting today, it's a necessary one though. Billy, what would be your recommendations as far as just kind of general estate planning? Is there anything that someone should know when they're just considering just making sure everything's good to go?
Yeah, the first thing is you've got to have a desire just to do it. You've got to say, okay, now's the time. Let me get an estate plan together, and then just make the call to a lawyer, to a professional, and just talk about it. Yeah. And you may find out that you're in better shape than you thought you were in, or that you're not in good shape. And it's and then at that point we could help you get everything set up in a way that is most convenient on your family. And that's what I tell folks at the end of the day is what we're trying to do is if something happens to you, they're going through all this mess with the funeral and all the emotional stress that comes with that. We don't want that process to be any harder with them navigating your will or lack thereof. So that's really when you should start. You gotta make that decision within yourself just to do it, just like you did when you did your will. In the 20s is pretty young and good. So, you should be proud of yourself. You got out of the way.
Yeah. Well, no, I remember going through it, and it was definitely, there were questions I had never considered before, and it took me a second to kind of answer them. And yet, once it's done, I have complete peace of mind. Like, here's what's happening. If something were to happen to me, here's how it goes down. And it's nice to know that it's there. It's done, it's taken care of. I can check that box that on the adulting list, done,
Absolutely. It's just, it's worth a conversation. And there's other things as well that, we usually do with wills, like a power of attorney. Right. Just things that will protect, so for instance, a will deals with what happens when you pass away. But there's other documents that in the estate planning world that deal with situations where you're still alive, but you just may not be in a good place. Right. Like you may have be incompetent for some reason. You may have a stroke or been in a bad accident. And so there's other documents we could do to make sure that, again, it's very easy on your family to continue managing things.
So essentially, estate planning is like this comprehensive package, and a will is one of the pieces of that package.
I would agree with that. Now, it's a very important piece, and it's probably the biggest piece. Mm-hmm. But there's other things, you got the power of attorney. There's also a healthcare power of attorney. A lot of people have heard of a living will. That's the document that says what happens when you're on life support, basically. Right. And these are all important to people. You also have a trust, and a trust is kind of like a super will. It's a very a very powerful document that people like because it's got a lot of privacy built into it, and a lot of times you could avoid probate. But yeah, this is all part of the spectrum of things you could do. And again, we're just trying to make it easier on your family and make sure your intentions and your assets go where they're supposed to go.
Yeah, so essentially a great first call then, or a great first step, if someone doesn't have a will or wants to update their will, very easily just give you a call and have a conversation.
That's it. It's just a conversation, and we have them all the time with people. And some people say, well, that's good. Let me think about it. We never hear from them again. And other people are the opposite. They need it. They're about to have a procedure. Or they're about to go out of town or go on a plane flight, and they need it like by Friday. So a lot of it depends on what's going on in your life. Now, I'll say with COVID and all this, it's been very busy. A lot of people are very scared, and I get it. Now's a good time to do it. And you know, because you never know. I mean, it looks like you've got people that are healthy are getting very sick.
Right. Well,
So,
that's the thing in life too. We just never know. You know, no one has the crystal ball that says, "Here's your day and time."
I wish.
I don't. I don't want to know. I don't want to know. Awesome. Well, Billy, thanks for joining me for Coffee Talk today. Truly appreciate it. We'll link up in the comments to this video so that if you have questions about your individual situation or want to ask Billy, how do I get started on a will, you can contact him directly. And then make sure you stay tuned. Every Thursday at 10 a.m. on Facebook, we'll be premiering a new Coffee Talk video, trying to offer value to you. And so hopefully you'll join us. All right. Have a great day, guys.